Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to talk about two different topics this morning. My name is David Cohen. I work at the CRC in Chicago, side of town. And I just talk about two different topics. They really have nothing to do with each other. That's the truth. What they have in common is that the person who I was speaking to, I said, what do you think people want to hear about? I mentioned these two topics. They have one slight thread that connects them. I'll mention that now. And that is we're going to be talking about cheese and gelatin. And both cheese and gelatin have in common, they come from something whose status we know. Cheese comes from milk, and gelatin mostly comes from different animal products. Both of them have a status that we know what their status is. But yet, when they switch into this other thing, when milk turns into cheese and animal products turn into gelatin, it raises different kinds of questions. And maybe their status should change. We all know what milk and meat are, but when they change into cheese and gelatin, their status may be a little bit different than what we think it is. And that's what we're going to talk about. Okay? We'll start with cheese. And if you'll bear with me, I'm going to turn this left around. Let's work that like this. Okay. The way we make cheese, what is cheese? I'm going to give you a drop of background of what cheese is. Milk is made of many different components. It has in it, of course, it has water in it, but it has two kinds of protein. One is called casein and one is called whey. Two kinds of protein. It has fat. It has a little bit of calcium. I think I'm missing something. So that's what you find in the milk. Okay? Making cheese means removing the casein protein out of the milk. That's what you're trying to do. You're pulling the casein protein out of the milk. Depending on whether there is or is not fat in that milk, the casein will come out either with fat or without fat. Okay? When the casein comes out, it pulls fat together with it. So if there's fat in the milk, the cheese that comes out of there will be casein mixed with fat. But when you pick up a piece of mozzarella cheese, that's casein mixed with fat. If there's no fat in the milk, it comes as a skim milk, which we'll see that in a second. We have skim milk. If you use skim milk, what comes out of there is just the casein, just the protein without any fat mixed into it. And the product that comes out is called, we call that cheese. There are, the Chachamim made a special takana. Many of you may know, before I get that, many of you may know that there are some people who eat only chalav Yisrael, and some people who don't eat, who eat what we call chalav stam, regular standard milk out in the street. And that's because the Chachamim were concerned to make sure that the milk actually came from a kosher animal, that it only came from a kosher animal, and therefore they said you must eat milk that a Jew is there by the milking. But many hold that the milk we have nowadays, the government checks it so well that we know that we're getting cow's milk. And therefore many people eat what we call chalav stam, milk that's not chalav Yisrael. What we're going to talk about today is called Gevinas Yisrael, okay? Cheese made by a Jew. Or cheese, well, we'll see what that means exactly. Actually, I spoke too quickly. But Gevinas Yisrael, a Jew's cheese. And everybody holds, almost everybody holds, you have to have Gevinas Yisrael. There's no such thing as, just in milk is chalav stam. You might go to Walgreens and just buy a plain bottle of milk, a Dean's bottle of milk. Actually, we actually even certify a Dean's bottle of milk. That's kosher because it's what we call chalav stam. In Gevina, it's not like that. And what's the reason for that? What is it that cheese needs to be Gevinas Yisrael? In order to understand that, we need to stop for a second. I told you that you make cheese by pulling out the casein. How do you pull out the casein? How do you get casein how do you get out of the milk? So the standard way to make cheese is you put something into it called rennet. Okay, you may have heard that word, rennet. The simplest way to get rennet is from a calf's stomach. Okay, it's from in the lining of the stomach. You take a piece out of that. It has an enzyme in there called rennet, it's called a protease. It works on protein. You put that into the milk, and out it pulls out the casein protein. Okay? That's the simple way to make milk. The simple way to make cheese. The Chachamim were concerned that if somebody who was not Jewish, someone who didn't keep kosher, would make the cheese, he would take rennet out of a treif animal. He would just have an animal that he's slaughtering for himself, take the meat out of it and put it into the cheese, and make his own cheese out of that treif with the treif rennet. Okay? Obviously, treif, calf, and milk is not kosher. Okay? Probably you're wondering, well, why would it be any better if we're using kosher calves? Okay? That's not for today's lecture. Okay? That's not what we're talking about today. There's a question whether you can make it from kosher calf. The Chacham will concern you make it from a treif calf. Okay? So we go out to, they would sort an animal and take the calf out of there and put it in and make cheese that was not kosher. So the Chachamim said, you have to have Gevinas Yisrael, a Jew's cheese. Now, there is a minority opinion that says, all the Chachamim meant was, just be careful. Just make sure they're using kosher rennet. That's all the Chachamim meant. There's a minority opinion like that. And there are communities that had a minhag to follow that opinion. that said that as long as you made sure they used kosher bread, that was good enough. There were such people with such minhagim. And the people who come from communities with that minhag should do that. People who have that minhag should follow that minhag. In America, it's almost completely unheard of in Orthodox circles to follow that minhag. People are conservative Jews say, well, we follow that custom, but it's really not accepted in Orthodox circles. There are people, again, there are individual families who have that custom going back many generations. The Shulchan Aruch says, if you're not sure what your custom is, you should not eat it. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Okay? The people who have that custom could follow it, but the bulk of opinions are that milk has to be Gvinas Yisrael. So the Chachamim weren't just saying, be careful. They were saying a Jew has to be part of, it has to be Gvinas Yisrael. We're going to find out what Gvinas Yisrael means in a second, but that's the Chacham said, it must be. Now, I told you the way you make cheese is by adding rennet into the milk. That's what I said to you. But I didn't tell you the whole truth. Okay? Really, there are two kinds of cheese. Okay? For our purposes, we're going to call them hard cheese and soft cheese. That's what we're going to call them. And for that, I can't make hard cheese for you, because I don't have rennet here to make it for you. But when you make hard cheese, you take the milk, you get it to the right temperature, you put in rennet, you let it sit for a while, and the casing drops out of it. It separates from the cheese. Okay, it begins to coagulate and float to the top and separate from the cheese. There's also a way to make cheese. What we call soft cheese. Okay? When you're familiar with that as cream cheese and cottage cheese and sour cream, those are soft cheeses. Okay, and those are made not by adding rennet. Okay? You don't need to add rennet to make. Okay, this one over here is whole milk, okay, and this is skim milk. And turn around to see what you're getting here. You don't recognize the color. Okay. This is whole milk and skim milk. And what you're doing is like this. This is a pH meter. Okay, the milk that we have here has a pH of 6.5. Okay, pH is a way of measuring how acidic or basic something is. This is a pH of 6.5. And what's going to happen is like this. As soon as we could get the acidity of this milk to be below 4.6, what's going to happen is it's going to separate into cheese. Okay? If you've ever remember seeing somebody that they left milk out on the counter and it turned into what looks like cottage cheese, okay, its heat has spoiled. Really what happened is that bacteria started to eat the milk. That's what happened. They produce something called lactic acid. The lactic acid turns it acidic, and it separates into cheese. So I have here, we are not going to sit here or wait around there for the next 3 days until it turns into cottage cheese by itself. Okay, we're going to put in vinegar. You can put in anything acidic. You can put in lemon juice or anything for that matter. Okay, commercially they put in all kinds of things to speed up the process. Okay, we're holding at 5.4, 5.3, 5.2.
If you stir it, want to go lower fat.
It's not going to take much. Don't.
It's currently now.
Yeah. Okay. So we're a little more. What? Trying to get to 4.6.
I'm trying to do it really fast. It's happening already.
It is beginning to curdle. I don't know how great the meter is doing. Okay, here we go. We're at 4.7, 4.8. Okay, we're there. Okay. So what's happening here is, okay, we're at 4.0 now. What's good? Let me give it a couple of spoonfuls for the skim milk. And the reason why I'm doing two separate milks is to show you. Okay, in both of them, what we're going to do is we're going to be pulling out. We're trying to pull out the casein. That's what we're trying to do. That's the protein. That's what's going to make it cheese. Okay, we're in business for both of them. We're trying to pull out the casein. Okay, but the difference is going to be this one that's fat, milk with fat in it. Okay. I'm going to get a toy. Hold on, space. Hold on. No. It's. Okay. What we're going to do now is like this. This is a coffee pot. We're not making coffee. Nothing to do with coffee. Okay? We're going to just give it a time. We're filtering it. Okay? This is how you do when you make cottage cheese. This one is full fat. This is the fatty one.
No, that's the skim one.
This is the skim one?
No, that's the fatty. Sorry, that's the fatty.
This is the one with the fat in it? Okay. So good. Okay, this is corn filters are really not meant for making cheese. That's the truth. I have to tell you. Okay, this one that has the fat, when it's finished, we drain all the liquid out of this. Okay, this is going to be cream cheese or something like cream cheese. It's not going to be exactly cream cheese because we missed something. We missed something here, which is the way they make it acidify is they put in a culture. They put in a certain kind of bacteria. Has a lot to do with the taste that comes out of it. But anyhow, hopefully we'll get something out of this thing. This one is going to come out with a different consistency. This is more like cottage cheese. Okay, cottage cheese is without fat. Let me just clean it up. That was my... Okay, see? So while this drips out, what's going on here is like this. What's going to be left on the top is called curd. Okay, this left on top is going to be called curd. What's dripping through is the liquid is called whey. Okay, for any of you who read, right? Exactly, yes.
Where's the spider?
Miss Muffet was eating cottage cheese. That's what she was eating. Okay, cottage cheese is actually an interesting blend. They take the curd, and then they blend it, mix it back with its whey. Okay, it separates into two things, and you mix it together, that's cottage cheese. Well, that's traditional cottage cheese. Anyhow, so this way of making cheese, which makes a different kind of cheese, doesn't use rennet. This kind of cheese that we're making here, cottage cheese, you don't use rennet to make cottage cheese. Okay? So when the Chachamim said that you need to make cheese, Gvinas Yisrael, a Yid has to be part of. We'll hear exactly what that means in a second. What does the Yid have to do? But a Jew's cheese, did they mean that only for hard cheese, like mozzarella and cheddar and those kind of cheeses that use rennet? Again, the reason why they said this din is because they said you have to do it because they might put in rennet from a treif animal. Is that what they said? Did they say only do it for those kind of what we call hard cheeses? Or did they mean even for soft cheeses also? And the question is, because a soft cheese doesn't need rennet. So no one thinks, if you walk into the store and you see cream cheese here, of course there's no rennet in it. Because you don't use rennet to make cream cheese or cottage cheese. It just has nothing to do with it. It happens to be, just an aside, nowadays put a drop of rennet into it. Just it helps in the processing. But in really making cheese, you don't need it. Okay? You don't make cream cheese and cottage cheese with those things. So the question is, when the Chachamim made that takana, did they have that in mind, or did they not have that in mind? Did they mean to include the soft cheeses or not? Okay, it's quite a debate between the poskim. Many different opinions as to whether they did or didn't mean it, and in almost all the American hashgachas are lenient on that question. Almost all the American hashgachas say soft cheeses, cream cheese, cottage cheese, etc., don't need to have Gvinas Yisrael. And that's why if you walk into the supermarket, you're going to find lots of national brands of soft cheese that have hashgacha on them. You can find Philadelphia cream cheese because they don't have to do very much to make it kosher. They don't have to do anything more than they do to make crackers out of kosher. They have the kosher ingredients, a rabbi visits on occasion, but they don't have to do the complications of making real Gvinas Yisrael. We'll see in a second what that is, the more complicated part of making that. If you want to buy kosher hard cheese, you want to buy, let's say, American cheese or cheddar cheese, you're not going to find the national brand of those kind of cheeses. You're going to walk in, you're going to find a Jewish brand of that who's catering just to the market of people who want to eat kosher, hold on a second, who want to eat kosher, specifically want to eat kosher cheese and will pay a premium to get kosher cheese, which is more difficult to make than regular cheese, yes.
What about Kraft?
So Kraft does not make hard cheeses.
The paleo, I know.
Oh, we'll get to paleo in a second. Very good, very quick. I'm headed to paleo. Get to paleo in a second. Okay, we're going to talk about that. But until recently, you would never see a national brand with a reputable hashgacha. Again, you might see it with a hashgacha. Excuse me?
Is Friendship a Jewish brand?
Friendship, no, but they only make soft cheeses. They make cottage cheese and soft. They make soft cheese, loads of them. But you wouldn't see a hard cheese, except the only people who would call it kosher are people who are saying, we hold you don't eat Gvinas Yisrael for those hard cheese. Again, I told you that's not an accepted opinion. So somebody's calling it kosher. They didn't just totally, make it up. They're not totally making it from no place, but it's not the accepted custom that those things should be treated as kosher. So we wouldn't consider that to be kosher. But soft cheeses, there's loads of them. You said Friendship. You can find Friendship, of course, because it just has to have kosher ingredients, just like the food next to it. I don't know, the bag of pretzels next to it. It's easy for them to be kosher. Yes?
Is rennet always animal? Isn't there synthetic rennet?
Yes, most definitely. Most definitely there is synthetic rennet. There's rennet actually from kosher animals, but usually people use, it's called microbial rennet. They make it in a lab, they can grow. Yes, so kosher cheese is made with that. But the Chachamim said, it doesn't help, even if the rennet is kosher, you still need to have Gvinas Yisrael. I can tell you what that means here. You still need to have Gvinas Yisrael, even though it's not like challah. In milk, many people, as long as you're sure you're getting cow's milk, you're okay. You don't need to have a Jew watching it. That's what we call challah stam. People eat that milk, lots of people eat that milk. But in cheese, it's not at all accepted to eat cheese just because the ingredients are kosher. In fact, most cheeses in America are made with kosher rennet. It's not so common to use animal rennet nowadays. It's not so common. It is done. It is done. I was actually standing once at a kosher cheese production. And when I came in, they said, Rabbi, we already put the rennet into the bucket. It's ready to be, we just hit the button, it's ready to go. So I said, no. My job is to make sure you're using kosher rennet. That's my job. That's why I'm here. So they said, okay, we'll put it back into the bucket and you start again. And they were actually using kef rennet. They were using treif rennet. That's exactly why I was there, was to watch them. That they had already put, they weren't being malicious. They just didn't realize. They had no idea. Yeah? Yes, go ahead.
Is there also a question whether or not rennet is actually like a davar or mamashu, because it's really, if we're talking about an enzyme, we're not really talking about an actual something.
So you would have a point if we were to separate the rennet from in a lab and create something that's just an enzyme. But in fact, that's not the way they used to make cheese. They took literally a piece off of the calf's stomach and threw it in. They just cut off a piece of flesh and dropped it in.
Yeah, so they separately extract just that particular enzyme without. There's nothing attached.
That would be questionable what the status that would be. But when we're talking about why the Chacham made this rule, they made the rule because people were doing it. Yeah, they were taking a piece of flesh or liquid from the different ways to do it and putting it in. Whether they would have made that takana nowadays, we could talk about that. Whether they would, but we're standing at the point that they've already made the takana. Okay, our cheese, we're getting someplace. It's wrong. But what happens is you see that we're dripping out some liquid out of there. In a plant, maybe we'll do that if someone's courageous. I should have brought gloves. We'll squeeze it out. Someone will squeeze out the liquid out of it to get the dry particle that we're looking for, the casing we're looking for. Okay, so we know hard cheeses need to be green as Yisrael. Soft cheeses we say don't need to be green as Yisrael. Okay, what does it take to make something green as Yisrael? I keep using that word, and I'm going to tell you what does it take to make green as Yisrael. Okay, and there are two completely different opinions as to what it takes. Okay, the Ramah in Shulchan Aruch says in order to make green as Yisrael, you do the same thing that you do for Chol Yisrael, which is a Jewish person has to be there while they're making the cheese. Someone has to oversee that they use the right kind of rennet. So if someone stands in the plant and just makes sure that they put in this one instead of that one. When they make the cheese, he watches it to put in the right kind of rennet. So the Jew has no role in it, he's just watching it. Of course, having the Jew watching it, if you think it from the company's perspective, is expensive. So there has to be a rabbi, a Jew, a Shemesh Rabbi standing there all the time watching them make the cheese. And that's why Kraft doesn't do it, because they say, what, have a guy just standing there watching us make cheese? It's not worth it. We don't gain enough from it. If you go to a different company, you go to Star Cheese, they say, well, for us it's worth it because we charge for kosher cheese a little bit more to cover the fact that someone had to stand there the whole time watching them make the cheese. But that's what the Ramah says. The Shach says, that's not how you make kosher cheese. When you make kosher cheese, what you have to do is either one of two things. Either the Jew has to own the cheese, and that's why he says it's called Gevinas Yisrael, a Jew's cheese. If you look in the Mishnah, it doesn't say a Jew watches it. For milk, it says the Jew watches it. For cheese, it says a Jew's cheese, and that means that the Jew has to own it, which is to say, if the Frankenthal family, they're the ones who own Star Cheese, they want to make cheese, or they own cheese, they want to make cheese, it's their cheese. The cheese that's being made is being made for them. That cheese is being made for them. That's Gevinas Yisrael. It's cheese for a Jew. And of course, the thinking thing, if it's made for a Jew, he's going to make sure they use the right ingredients. The Shach says a different choice. He doesn't have to own it if the Jew participates in making the cheese. And that's understood to me. Yes, that's understood to me if the Jew puts the rennet into the cheese. Okay? And in order to make it Gevinas Yisrael, the Jew has to participate. So until a couple of years ago, what was accepted in the United States was that in order to make cheese Gevinas Yisrael, we followed both of these opinions. Okay? It was a question which one. So we had a mashgiach standing there, and that mashgiach put in the rennet. That was his job. He put in the rennet. Didn't seem very complicated. He was there anyhow for the Ramah. He put in the rennet for the Shach. There wasn't such a difference between the two opinions. It didn't take much to do both of them. If you have to be there to throw it in, and you have to be there to watch, it's basically the same thing. It's just giving him another responsibility. So instead of watching, you also have to throw in, or instead of throwing in, you have to watch also. That's not terribly complicated to do both, and that's what had been done for many, many years in the United States until it's been done for, let's say, 50 years. That's been the standard in the United States of how to make kosher cheese. So mashgiach stands there while they're making the cheese, and he's putting in the rennet for hard cheese. We went for cheddars and mozzarellas and things like that. But there's a problem. problem is like this. You're watching this liquid dripping out of here, and for years, for decades, this liquid which is dripping out, it's called whey. Okay? That whey was considered garbage. Okay? 'Cause really the main part of the cheese is the solids that stay behind. The liquid that drains out was considered unimportant and worthless. It really was garbage. They threw it out. What happened was partially to do with sewage rules. Municipalities didn't want people draining this stuff into their sewers. Having to also do with companies being more cost conscious. They didn't want to throw something out that maybe had value to it. People started finding all kinds of things to do with whey. Okay, now I mentioned to you that whey is a protein. Okay, the whole liquid is not protein. There's sugars in there, so I forgot that. That's what the part that the sugars. Lactose. In the whey is the whey protein, is the lactose sugar and calcium and water. So there were things in there that could be used, and companies came up with all kinds of ideas of how to use their whey. All kinds of ideas of what they could do with whey they could earn some money out of it and not have to put it down the drain. Both of those are important. They wanted to not waste it, and also the municipality said to them, you can't put that stuff down the drain. It was not good for whatever. They came up with all kinds of ideas. Well, that caused a problem for people giving hashgacha as follows. Somebody who is making whey wants his whey to be sold as kosher. So he says, I understand that my cheese is not going to be kosher because there's no rabbi throwing in the rennet and things like that. But whey, we're not going to talk about it exactly today, but there are a number of ways that a number of methods through which whey can become not kosher. Okay? How they are is a little too complicated. There are a number of methods that it can become not kosher. So the companies said, we need hashgacha on our whey. We don't need hashgacha on our cheese. We understand that the cheese is not going to be kosher, but we want hashgacha on our whey. It became a very important commodity that it should be kosher. Well, the problem is like this. In a big cheese company, cows don't only make milk Monday to Thursday. Okay? Cows make milk 7 days a week. A big cheese company makes cheese 7 days a week. Well, a rabbi could stand there on Shabbos and watch them making cheese. Okay? A rabbi can't throw the rennet in on Shabbos. So a plant that's running 7 days a week could have Venus Yisrael according to the Ramah. Now you can have a rabbi stand there. I don't know if I would want to volunteer to be the rabbi to be there on Shabbos, but there are people who do it. There are couples who do it. A husband and wife team who go there together. They live on the farm. They live at the dairy plant, and they do it part of the time. They do, the husband does part of the time, the wife does the other time, or just two people together, and they take turns doing it. So there are people who be willing to do it. They'd be willing to watch it. But because of Hilchos Shabbos, they can't be the one to throw in the rennet. So now, some of the hashgachas decided that it was good enough to make the cheese Venus Yisrael according to the Ramah. Again, until a few years ago, everybody did both the Ramah and the Shach. The Jew watched the cheese, and the Jew threw in the rennet as well. He did both of them. That was the standard to make the cheese kosher. Came along a number of hashgachas and said, you know what? It's good enough to do it according to the Ramah. That's good enough. We don't have to do it according to the Shach. Their original reason for doing that was to make the whey kosher. And there are a number of plants that do that to make the whey kosher. They didn't care about the cheese. But recently, one of those companies said, well, if our whey is kosher, and the rabbi's standing there anyhow, why not make our cheese kosher also? And that's the paleo cheese you're talking about. That cheese is being made kosher following the Ramah. That's not following what people were doing until now. And many hashgachas still wouldn't do that. They only would do it if it's both together, the rabbi watching and throwing it in. That's OU. That's an OU hashgacha. There's another hashgacha that does similar things, but it's not to say that following the Ramah is wrong, okay? But it's just not what was done until now. Until now, it was always done. We did the Ramah and the Shach. We did the Ramah to watch, the Shach to throw it in, and they said, well, we did that because it was really easy. It was simultaneous. What's the difference? If I'm watching and throwing it in, I could just do both. But really, the Ramah is right. The din is according to the Ramah. It's enough just to watch it. That's what their opinion is. And therefore they say, so we can give hashgacha like that. We give hashgacha. Originally, again, the original push to do that was in order to make the whey kosher. That was the original goal, was that the whey should be kosher. But with time, they said, you know what? Let's make the cheese kosher also. Okay? And that's the paleo cheese that you see now. It's a retail item. I don't know if there are other commercial items, but it's a retail item that you can see now that has kosher. So it's really a first time that we remember that a national brand of hard cheese is kosher.
What about Cabot used to run, they don't anymore because now they were bought out by the acting firms, but Cabot used to have Pesach, they would run one kind of cheddar, it was their white sharp cheddar, and then they also did a white extra sharp cheddar. It was also it was like OU, halal, and it like had a whole gram, and it was kosher to Pesach also. Maybe because it was a smaller run.
100%. 100%. It was only...
Tillamook has the one cheddar cheese also. It's a Crown Heights.
Okay. It was only worth it for people to make hard cheese that was kosher if they were doing it for a limited market. So they made it special for Pesach once a year. They said, we'll do our one run of that. So we say, and we'll charge a premium for that. We'll say the rabbi will come in.
It was charged the regular Cabot cheese.
So then if they chose to do that, but they were doing this on a small scale. They're saying this, we're going to have, but the reason why it costs more is because someone's got to stand there. Not for the milking, but once the milk shows up, every 45 minutes a new batch of cheese is made. There's got to be a rabbi there all the time. So you're adding a certain expense. So if they can afford it and they can fit into the cost, fine, but nobody was doing that. Kraft cheese wasn't kosher because it wasn't worth it. You know, if a package of cheese costs $1 and now it costs $1.05, so they said, well, you're going to buy that cheese, but so many other people won't buy it if we raise it price by a nickel, so we don't do it. That's what happens. So it was only the Jewish brands that were doing that. Okay.
So what's the bad news for sharp cheese and all that?
It makes it harder. Let's think about Oneg, because that's who it's competing really with. It's not Chalav Yisrael. Because stock is appealing to people. Let's say Oneg. So Oneg is saying, wait a second, we have to charge more for our cheese because, well, partially because we have a bigger requirement. Paleo also has that requirement. They have to have a rabbi there 24 hours a day. They do have that expense of having somebody there, but
What did you say?
Paleo. Then it has an OU.
I don't really get it. The truth is, I haven't really seen it so much in Chicago, but like on the East Coast, I think
Right. So Paleo says, wait, we also have to pay for a rabbi there all the time. They do. They have someone there 24 hours a day. They actually run 24 hours a day. They have people there all the time. They're paying for someone. But the other side is, Paleo has much economies of scale that Oneg cheese doesn't have. Paleo is making, you can only imagine that Paleo is a lot bigger company. Oneg cheese can't compete with them just because of their size. You know, we make 1 million tons of cheese and you make 1,000. It's not the same. You know, we're just, so they might not have, what? Well, you could have 10 vats going. He'd have to keep an eye on the whole place. He could watch 10 vats just as well as he could watch one. Okay, within reason, he can watch a lot of things just as well as he could watch one. So they're able, they can pull it off. They can sell it. I'm guessing that doesn't cost any more. You know, in a big company like that, a full-time salaries of, again, there's 2 people or 4 people. I don't remember how many people there are. There's a lot of people involved. And it's worth it. They can pull it off. They can, you know. Okay. Do we have any questions on cheese before we move on? Yes. Yes.
So the Dina Yisrael concept really doesn't have much to do with the renting. I know it does, but let's say it is made in the lab and it's not from an animal. It's still an issue that...
Right. It's, the original basis for the rule has to do with rennet. But in practice, it has nothing to do with rennet. In practice, the rabbi has to make sure they don't use rennet. That's the truth. He does have to make sure about that, but that's not really what's going on. It's once the Chacham told us we have to do it, so we do it, even though we don't really need it for the technicality.
So technically, it's kosher, but not supervised.
So it's kosher ingredients, but it's an example. There's a few things that the Chacham said, even though the ingredients are kosher, it's not kosher unless something to do with the process is done right also. You mentioned Gvinis Yisrael. Bishul Yisrael. Sometimes the Jew has to be part of the cooking. So again, the ingredients are all kosher, but even though the ingredients are kosher, it's still not kosher because we're missing something in what was done. You know? So,
without taking off on a big tangent, what is vegetable rennet?
Vegetable rennet is what the Shulchan Aruch describes as what you would use to make cheese. I can't tell you specifically what it is, but the way you make a hard cheese, the rennet is, a protease. It's something that works on protein. There are other plants that produce proteases, something that breaks apart proteins. There are different enzymes from figs and what are they called? Different vegetables that make those things. So I don't know which is the right one to make cheese, but if you have the right one, you put it into your milk, it'll separate it. It'll pull out the casein molecule.
But sometimes you'll see something that actually says vegetable rennet.
Okay.
And I don't recall, I've never bought it, but I don't recall if it ever has had a...
That wouldn't make it kosher. As she had mentioned, just because it had kosher ingredients, not enough to do it. It had to have been overseen by Shomer Shabbos, had to have been there. So the fact that all the ingredients are kosher didn't do the trick yet. Still not good enough. It has to have. We have this rule. We have to have Venus Yisrael. So it's yes, right. We have from the manufacturing.
Between cheese and processed cheese.
Say that again.
Is there a difference between cheese and processed cheese?
For this purposes, no. Processed cheese is regular cheese. Let's say a cheddar cheese, which they then cook afterwards, and they add some other ingredients to it and reshape it into what looks like cheese. But for this, the base of it is a cheese. The base of it, let's say, is a cheddar cheese or a mozzarella, whatever they're using from. That cheese, if it wasn't Venus Yisrael, it wouldn't be kosher. Okay, a processed cheese is basically a cheese. They make cheese just like we're doing here, well, something like that. They make cheese. I got something to trip it. You can taste it when we finish. It's really dripping out nicely. It's really, okay. It's really regular cheese. It's regular hard cheese that was melted. They add some other ingredients to it and then re-solidify it. But if the base was not kosher cheese, then it's not going to help that they change it into something.
Can this process be done at all remotely, like as far as adding the rennet, things like that, like to be able to push a button that adds the rennet?
It's a really good question. It's a really good question.
It's like a new thing developing in the...
It's not so new, actually. It's a question if you could do it remotely, and it's a question sometimes you have to do it. That is to say, if there are some plants, there isn't anybody out there pouring rennet in the bucket. It doesn't exist. There is no one out there in the plant. Everything's automatic. Everyone sits in, it looks like a Star Trek. Everyone's sitting there in front of a million screens, pushing buttons, and they could be remote. It's a good question. Not for today. It's a debate whether they can or cannot do that. What did you do?
Even make that so much chia.
That's a question. Right? It might be that it could be that he could do that. Watch the screens, push the buttons, and do what he has to do, and that's good enough. I mean, if he stands there out in the factory, he can see nothing. He can see a bunch of tanks. He doesn't see anything. There's nothing to see there. Everything is sealed, and the things are being injected, the milk is flowing, the cheese coming. There's nothing in the plate. You don't see anything. You just see an empty room. But really, you don't know what's opening and closing unless you sit in the control room. Okay, that's the basis for saying it. Okay, let's move on. We have a few minutes. I'm just going to check my time, so I don't have to watch it anymore. Okay, we have like 10 minutes. Okay, we're going to do what we can for gelatin. Okay, really, don't finish. It's really almost done. It's actually very nice. If anyone wants to see it, it's a nice. It smells a little bit vinegary because we overdid it a little bit. We overdid it a little bit. But when you make, so to speak, real cream cheese, you wouldn't put in that much sugar. You put in a culture that not only does it create the acid, but it also gives a good taste to it. Also, it adds to the taste. The culture produces things that you like. Okay, vinegar, tastes like vinegar. But anybody who wants to try for lunch, it's fine. I don't know if that's soy milk or inflation lunch. It's really drying out nicely in here. Okay. Ricotta is different. No, actually, you mentioned ricotta is they take the whey and they make the cheese out of the whey protein. The whey protein. Most cheese is made out of the casein protein.
So that's more like what?
That has maybe that has to do with it. It's not made from the casein protein. Made from the whey protein.
Is there more sugar in the whey? Maybe that's like...
There is all the sugars in the whey. All the sugar's in the whey. Is that why ricotta is sweet? Okay. I'll accept that. No. Mascarpone is a hard cheese. That's made. It's a hard cheese. Yeah, I take it back. Take it back. I'll check my notes. I don't remember. Okay, let me just put this here. This is the one with the fat. Does anyone remember what it was? Okay. I'll take the other one to Jim. It's still a little wet. Yeah, just be careful with it.
So can I ask you a question? What do you think?
Yeah, go ahead.
As a Jew, I could make cheese at home. Hard cheese, cold cheese, whatever cheese I want to make.
100%. 100%. Now, let me just say this. If you want to make hard cheese at home, it's a little difficult to get. It's just the vinegar you're smelling. You just put it down. Yeah, the difficulty is getting retail-sized packages of kosher rennet.
No, I wanted to make it this way, and I know how to do it.
If you could get a kosher rennet, yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah, no problem. My sister-in-law makes her own soft cheeses. Not for Kashrus reasons, just they like it. I mean, they don't use coffee filters, they use cheesecloth. That's why it's called a cheesecloth. They don't use coffee filters, but I don't have a cheesecloth. What?
The cheesecloth is being...
Well, that's why they call it a cheesecloth, because that's what you use it for, to drain out this. Okay, anyhow. Okay, let's do a few minutes of rennet, of gelatin. Okay. Gelatin is something called collagen. It's found in animal bones and hides and other places. It's a kind of a protein, and it holds things together. And we'll skip ahead a second. What people use gelatin for is, it's used as a thickener, and it's used as something that also would hold different things together. You might find it in yogurt. We can talk about it in pills if we get to that. It's used in different ways as a like a binder. It holds things together. When you want to make yogurt, if you make yogurt by yourself, it'll come out a little watery. And you add a thickener to it. So if you go out to the store and you buy a not kosher yogurt, very often it'll have gelatin in it. That's the thickener that helps hold it together. Okay. So the question of the kashrus of gelatin first came up about 75 years ago, maybe even a little more than that. And the question at the time was they used to at that time make gelatin out of bones. Okay, it's not the way we make it nowadays. That's not typically how it's made nowadays. They made it out of bones, and the question then revolved around a number of issues. But bones had a special advantage that there are those who hold that the bone of a treif animal is kosher. Even though the animal was not kosher, or the animal was not slaughtered properly, the bone is not included in the Isser. The flesh, the meat is not kosher. The meat is not kosher, but the bone is. And that was a question then as maybe the gelatin should be kosher because it's made out of the bone, and the bone is a part of the animal that might be considered kosher even though the animal wasn't kosher. Okay? If that would be true, it would be easy to make kosher gelatin. If in those days, that would be easy to make that. And there were those who held like that. Excuse me. Most did not accept that, but there were those who held like that. What happened over the years is that companies stopped making gelatin out of bone. There are still some who do. I believe that it's used for photographic film. They still use that. It's a very fine gelatin they use from bone. I believe that's my impression. Nowadays, most people make gelatin out of pig skins. Okay, it's called porcine gelatin. Most people made it out of pig skin. A certain amount made out of beef hides as well. Also, okay. Pig skins. It's actually a Mishnah that says the hide of a pig is not kosher. So although there was a question that maybe bones of animals might be kosher, so to speak, they considered not a piece of flesh of kosher. Pig skins are not kosher. So even though you could that possibility that maybe since it's made out of bones, that's good enough to make it. That's good enough. We're off the hook, no problem. That doesn't work anymore because nowadays the large majority of gelatin that you have, especially in food items, is not made from bones. It's made from pig skins. So I know it doesn't sound so nice to be a nice Jewish mother, and we brought pig skins into our house. So it doesn't sound so great. Okay, anyhow, but there were still those who held that it might be kosher anyhow. 5 minutes? Okay, 5 minutes. There are those who held that it might be kosher anyhow. Without getting into all the details, two strong possibilities were mentioned as to why it might be kosher anyhow. One is, when you you look at a pig skin and you look at gelatin, they don't look at all the same. Gelatin is really one component of the pig skin. And what you do is you get rid of everything else that's in the skin, leaving just the collagen behind to give you this product that we call gelatin. So there were those who said it qualifies for something called nishtana. Okay, nishtana means something that changed. It became, it's not the original thing that was there, and since it's not the original item that was there, even though the original item was not kosher, this could become kosher. Okay, so it's actually what I mentioned before. It's the opposite of what's happening with the cheese. The milk was kosher. When we turned it into cheese, we said maybe it became not kosher. Here we're going the other way around. We're saying it started off as not kosher. It was a pig skin, but maybe it changed so dramatically that now it became kosher. Okay, and the argument against it is, if you really look at what's going on here, nothing changed. We didn't change one thing to another thing. What we did was we just pulled away the different parts that we didn't want, leaving behind the collagen that we did want. It's as if to say, I took a kernel of wheat, I took off the chaff, I took off the outer layers, leaving myself just the white flour that was on the inside. Well, you wouldn't say that was changed, that wasn't nishtana from the kernel. Of course not. We just took off the different layers that we didn't want, leaving behind the part that we did want. Okay? The argument against that is, halacha usually looks at things based on the way an average lay person looks at something. A lay person who looks at it would never see the connection between the collagen and the pigskin that it came from. It went through all these different processes. To us, to the lay person, it appeared to have changed so dramatically to become a new thing. Okay? So it's a possibility that it might be mutter because of nishtana. I have to mention to you, let's say it even was nishtana, it's a machlokes whether nishtana is mutter or not. When you have something treif that changes into something kosher, does that make it mutter or not? Okay? The general rule is, for that question is, if the question is something to do that's asr midoraisa, asr from the Torah, then we don't allow nishtana. Okay, pig skins are usher midaraisa. Simple understanding is they'd be usher midaraisa. So nishtaina might not be mutter. Okay, another possibility to be matter is that in the process of turning it from pig skin into gelatin, there are stages in the process that it becomes inedible. Okay, the chemicals that are added to it are so awful that it becomes inedible along the way as it's in the way to become turning into collagen. That's one possibility. Well, it became inedible, doesn't make a difference anymore. It lost its connection and its motor. The argument against that is that when something's part of a process and temporarily it became inedible, then that doesn't make a difference. If it became really inedible, okay, inedible is gone. It's not usher anymore. But this only became temporarily inedible. It's a process. You do A, B, and C. At stage B, it's not edible. But it's part of the process of turning from this to this. We go through A, B, and C. Along the way, it might be not edible, but when it's finished, it's going to be edible. Okay, so this is a debate. Well, we're doing it really quick. Even if we didn't have 5 minutes, we wouldn't get into the gory details. But it's a question. In this situation, all the national hashgachas in the United States will not accept it as kosher. Will not accept gelatin as kosher. But it used to be that in Israel, the chief rabbinate used to accept it as kosher. Gelatin made under the right conditions, they consider kosher. And there were others who followed as well. Okay. This is not nearly as dramatic as what was going on with the cheese. In the cheese, everybody said you need convenience as well. For gelatin, there was still a small minority who felt that it was okay until the chief rabbinate changed the rules. I don't know, 10 years ago maybe. They decided from now on we will not allow gelatin to be, animal gelatin from treif animals to be considered kosher. And then started something new. If you make gelatin from kosher animal hides, I don't mean just from beef. I mean it's from beef that was slaughtered as kosher. That gelatin is kosher. Well, it came from a kosher animal. Of course it's kosher. But it's not, the poskim said it's not even fleishiks. And the reason is because when you're finished with it, after you've done all this processing to it, it doesn't taste like meat. Okay? And therefore, because of the rules of milk and meat, if it doesn't taste like meat, it's not fleishiks anymore. Now, that's different than kosher fish gelatin. You can make gelatin out of kosher fish skins also. That is fish. So that kosher fish gelatin you can't eat with meat. So, for example, I don't know if anyone has recipes for this, but if you buy marshmallows that are made with kosher fish gelatin, and there are, you'll see it in the ingredients, it says kosher fish gelatin, I mean, really kosher fish gelatin, with a regular national hashgacha to it, you couldn't eat that together with meat. Okay? I don't know yet of recipes that have marshmallows on their meat, but I'm sure someone does. Okay, with marshmallows melted on top of it. So if those marshmallows are made with fish gelatin, then that should not be eaten with meat. We don't eat meat and fish together.
They don't specify that on the package.
Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. It depends. You have to look more carefully to see if it says that. Gelatin is that's beef gelatin made from and the reason why is what happens like this. Just a drop of history. What happened is 40, 50 years ago, if any of you remember the name, the Barton's Chocolate Company wanted to make chocolates with gelatin in it. So they had their rabbi make them kosher beef gelatin from slaughtered beef hides. He made one production of it. Okay, they went and collected hides, they made a production of it, and it lasted them for many years. For many years they were making it with really kosher, not fleishiks hides. And it was kosher. They ran out. Okay, and so for maybe 20 years there was no kosher beef gelatin available. When I say kosher, again, when I say kosher, I mean kosher according to what we would consider kosher. There are people out there who follow the other opinion who say that all gelatin like that is kosher. They call it kosher gelatin. That's not what we have in mind. So what happened was, when the Israeli rabbinate decided that they would no longer accept gelatin as kosher, unless it came from kosher animals, all of a sudden the Israeli dairy companies all of a sudden were stuck. They were used to making their yogurts and things like that with gelatin. So American kosher dairy companies never use gelatin. They use all kinds of other gels to hold it together. But these companies were used to using gelatin. So they didn't want to switch the recipes like that. They wanted to keep using gelatin. So they said, we want real kosher beef gelatin. So companies responded to that request, and they've started up again in the past maybe 10 years making really kosher beef gelatin. They go to slaughterhouses, regular slaughterhouses from where you buy your beef, and they buy the hides. Okay, the hides which used to be garbage. Really, they're garbage. They buy the hides and turn them into kosher beef gelatin. And that started in Eretz Yisrael, where they wanted to use it for their yogurts, and eventually trickled its way back down to marshmallows and many other things. I just met a rabbi who's using it to make casings for hot dogs. That they use now that it's become more of an industry to make this real kosher gelatin. People have done it. If you have a minute, I have here, I'll just mention for a second. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Why can't you use fish gelatin to use it? Yeah.
You could. Okay, let me take it back. From a halachic perspective, you could. The problem is, fish gelatin doesn't have the right bloom. Bloom is how you measure how effective the gelatin is, and it doesn't really work very well. It doesn't work well enough to make yogurt. Beef gelatin is a better quality. It's measured by what's called bloom. It's a better quality, and that's what works. The people may have tried with fish. I can't say they didn't try, but the beef is what they're looking for. Okay. If I could have a minute just to talk to you. So, we're working with the assumption that the gelatin is not kosher. Okay, there are those who disagree, but working with that assumption that gelatin is not kosher. Standard gelatin is not kosher. There are two types of products that people come across most often that have gelatin in them. What I mean is like that. What I mean is, if you go to the store and you see a candy bar that has gelatin in it, it's not going to have hashgacha on it. That has not kosher gelatin. It's not going to have a hashgacha. So you're probably not going to buy it anyhow. Just because of the gelatin, there's 10 other ingredients, we don't know what they are. But in pills, in medicines, it's a place where we come across it. And they come in two kinds. Okay, I have here only one of them. You can pass it if you want. You can take this. These are what you have here is called soft gels. Okay? A soft gel is like a little, how do you call it? A little football. Okay? And inside of it is sealed the liquid. Okay? The soft gel, inside of that is sealed the liquid. The outside is gelatin. And the older type is called the hard gels, and those are, I couldn't find any. It's so funny, all the people I deal with.
Are they the time release ones, or those considered a hard ones? Because those have a harder...
Well, the ones that have, no, I don't mean, the liquids are like this, are soft gels. The kind is that you pull apart, they come with two pieces that snap together, and you can pull them apart. Those are hard gelatin capsules. And it's funny, because all the people I deal with, too many people I deal with work in Kashrus. So all of them, I said, do you have any gel caps? They said, no, we don't have any. We don't use gel caps in our house. So too many of them, so I couldn't find anybody who had any. I said to the office here, I said, do you have any? They said, no, we don't use them. They're not kosher. So they said, we only have pills. Anyway, those are, they pull apart. Now, the way they make those hard gel caps is, the old Tyler that you pull apart, that you can separate into two pieces. Well, the way they make those is, they take something that looks like this, looks like pen, okay? They dunk it into liquid gelatin, pure 100% gelatin, just dunk it in. And when they pull it out, and the liquid dries on the edge of the pen, on the edge of the whatever the stick is, and then that's it. That's the pill. That's it. It's just 100% pure. These soft gels have other ingredients into it, but if you cut it open, you'll see it's basically just gelatin. Okay? And this holds the liquid. Those can't hold the liquid. This can hold the liquid. If you cut it open, you'll see. You can come here to see it. Yes, very good. That's very good. It is vitamin E, actually. Not used for eating. We have this in the house for rubbing on. That's great. One of my daughters has a scarf. We need to rub it on. Very good. We're done.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm almost done. Another 30 seconds. So let me just say is we have one cheese. The other one is still finishing up. Do you want to be the guinea pig? Good excuse. Good excuse. Okay, anyhow. Okay, so and once we're just finished on the pills, it's like this. The seriously position for people taking pills on these kind of pills is as follows. Without getting into all the halachic details, if a person is taking a gel cap for a condition that's serious enough that it would incapacitate the person. In other words, they're not just taking it because they have a little inconvenience or it's good for they're growing their toenails a little bit longer. They're taking it from that's incapacitating. They're really knocked out from something and they need to take it. And there aren't options of taking it in a tablet form. There aren't other choices that give them the same medicinal value that they need, then they can take it. If there's another choice, for example, in my house, you can take Tylenol in a tablet, you can take Tylenol in a pill, in a gel cap. So for people who could swallow both of them, it's more convenient to have them in the gel cap because it's easier to swallow down. But we take the tablet because the tablet doesn't have kosher concerns. But if a person has no choice, they're taking, or they have taken with a person who can't swallow or something like that, and that's there for them. There is no other choice for them. Then they can take the gel cap. The halacha behind that, where we came up with that from, is a little too complicated for today. But that's a general policy. Yes. You got a question? No question. Okay. You're just waiting for your soft cheese. This one's almost. Yeah. Let's get set. Yeah. This is the skim. This is going to be, this one, what it is what you're getting over here is just casein, just the protein. And all the way it's dripping here together. This is just casein. And this is like a cottage cheese. This is the curd part of the cottage cheese. This is the skim one. That one, when the casing comes out, when it separates, it encapsulates the fat in it also. So that has fat, and that's a cream cheese.
That's why the water, the whey is cloudy. Is that why? Because it actually encapsulated the fat as well?
No, there's no fat in either. This started as skim of no fat.
Has no fat in it. Has fat when it skims off of it.
That's missed away from the other.
It's already had. It's not just more on the other one has fat in it. No, the way because the casing captured the fat and pulled
Okay,
the
let's
fat
stop.
off.